The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar on ICAR aluminum training presented by ICAR. I am Melissa Joles with Impact Collision Solutions, and Jeffrey Poole from ICAR, who is their performance training coordinator, will be your presenter today. The presentation will take approximately 30 minutes, and we are recording it, so we will post it on the website under training videos. And if you have questions, you can type them in the chat box at the bottom right of your screen. And when Jeff is done with the presentation, we'll take the questions and he'll answer them for you. And then at the completion of the presentation, I will email everybody a copy of it so you have it for future reference. Now I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Melissa. Always a pleasure to work with you and the folks at Impact Collision Solutions. Morning, everyone, or afternoon, wherever you happen to be. My name's Jeffrey Poole with ICAR. We're going to take a look at some of ICAR's aluminum training and some of the options that are available. Some of these are applicable to the Ford F-150. As we look, though, at aluminum training more on a global basis, what you find is that there's a lot of common themes in the repairs, the build, design, engineering of aluminum structured vehicles, and therein also the repairs. So with that, we're going to get moving ahead, keep us on track time-wise. Just a quick review. It's important to understand what ICAR's ultimate mission is and the vision. Ultimately, we want to ensure that each person in the collision repair industry has the information, knowledge, and skills required to perform complete, safe, and quality repairs for the ultimate benefit of the consumer. This is something that's important as most of you are out there in a service-oriented business, and your customers and ultimately the shop's customers are the ones that we want to see out there having that safely repaired vehicle. So if the unfortunate future collision occurs, that vehicle performs as it should. It's really no secret that aluminum use is on the rise, and Ford certainly has made a statement with the 2015 F-150. There are a number of other vehicle manufacturers, tends to be the higher-end vehicle manufacturers, that have been using aluminum for some time to some degree or another, and we see that trend continually increase so far as the use of aluminum. I don't think it's going to go the other way with corporate average fuel economy mandates being what they are. Just briefly, before I get into the specific courses that ICAR has available and how to identify and find those courses, I want to touch just a little bit on aluminum vehicle design and build and some of the implications of that, just a brief refresher. So essentially, as we look at an aluminum structured vehicle, we may have some castings, extrusions, and stampings. And we'll briefly take a look at each one of those. Stampings are very similar to what we've seen for decades and decades out there in vehicle construction, where they take a sheet of material and they have large presses and dies, and they stamp out these parts to form those vehicle parts. We see stampings used in many of these aluminum vehicles in quite extensive amounts. When we look at extrusions, extruding tends to be a process that is utilized in aluminum vehicle construction. We don't see it too often in steel vehicle construction per se. There have been some isolated incidences where there was an aluminum extrusion within a steel vehicle structure, perhaps a rocker panel reinforcement or something of that nature. Essentially, an extrusion is where they take molten aluminum and they press it through a die to form the part. It can be a hollow tubular part, or it may have internal wall structures which give it quite increased amount of strength. The upper left-hand photo there that's yellow, red, and green is a steel rocker panel comprised of 3 separate pieces, whereas you can see in the 2 lower photos, they can make a rocker panel out of one aluminum extrusion, and they can have a multitude of different wall thicknesses, internal wall structures, ultimately get a much more rigid part in one part with no seams, and that helps minimize corrosion issues. We do end up with some limitations there on extrusions, though. Those internal wall structures and things of that nature make it a very serious challenge to repair, and in many cases may not be repairable. If it's just an open tubular extrusion, we may have some repair options there. Again, there's a lot of additional information that goes around extrusions and repairability that we can take a look at in the courses a little bit later on. Castings tend to be used in some vehicle body structures. We're seeing some castings used in some steel vehicle body structures, cast aluminum strut towers and things like that. whereas we see it in an aluminum-intensive vehicle, we may see it as a strut tower, a B-pillar reinforcement, or something of that nature. Castings, if you can envision taking a mold, a sand mold, and then pouring molten aluminum into it, and that kind of forms the casting. Now they've got refined manufacturing processes for that help ensure the integrity and higher strength in those castings, but ultimately we see those castings as very rigid pieces that have some sort of a fixed application in there. They may be building blocks that other pieces attach to in order that they can bring that structure together. Castings are not very forgiving. They ultimately don't have a whole lot of ductility or flexibility, so whenever they get damaged, they do tend to deform and crack, or if they've deformed and haven't cracked, they tend to crack if any attempt is made to straighten it. So castings typically are a replacement-only type item. Now, I didn't speak much about stampings, but stampings tend to be the most repairable of the manufacturing methods that we have out there. And the big challenge with aluminum is what's on the screen right now, and that's the work hardening characteristics. And it's important that technicians and the industry as a whole understand some of the fundamental differences between how aluminum responds to forming and repair and collision energy versus steel. There's some differences there that, as we start to look at damage analysis and repairability, definitely impact what we're going to be doing with this vehicle. So work hardening is something that's very predominant in aluminum. It tends to have a very high work hardening exponent, which tends to increase the propensity for it to crack if it's damaged or attempts are made to straighten it. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be straightened in a sheet form, but there may be limitations on what we can do. Castings should never be straightened. Extrusions might afford some opportunities for straightening, and sheet aluminum tends to be the most repairable. There's also different heating considerations whenever we look at aluminum versus contrasting that to steel. With aluminum melting at a much lower temperature, it's critical that the technicians and the industry understand that there are what's known as annealing temperatures and appropriate working window temperatures for aluminum repairs. And so whenever we use the term annealing, we're talking about heating it to a point where it permanently softens and destroys the strength properties of that particular material. We certainly want to make sure we're conscious of any limitations there may be in that arena. So when it comes to damage analysis of aluminum structured vehicles and vehicles with aluminum components in there, again, it's going to be critical that those folks assessing the damage on the vehicle and rating the estimates and repair orders understand some of the differences in the way aluminum responds and the do's and don'ts along the way of the aluminum structured vehicles. Straightening also affords some interesting challenges. In many cases, we may find that we're very limited on the repairability of damaged aluminum components, and we're working towards identifying the extent of damage in the vehicle and perhaps replacing components to that point in the vehicle, depending on, again, the particular vehicle manufacturer's allowances in that arena. There's certainly going to be some differences in cutting and drilling and grinding and things of that nature as we deal with it. Aluminum certainly cuts easier and grinds and drills easier than steel, so shouldn't be too many challenges in that arena, just a different kind of approach, and in some cases a couple of different tools that we'll take a look at in some of the courses for doing these operations. We also get into part attachment considerations in some of the courses, and as we look at bolts and rivets, and really rivets is the big topic out there between that and welding, because again, depending on what vehicle you're working on, you may find that there's a multitude of different rivets, tools, procedures, techniques used. So therein, there's a lot of discussion out in the industry about the different riveting tools, what do I need for which vehicle, and those discussions really come down to vehicle-specific applications as to what do I need for one vehicle versus another. In most cases, whenever we're dealing with an aluminum structured vehicle and throughout the repair process, if there's a rivet being used, we're probably using an adhesive in conjunction with that. As we look through some of the course content of some of the courses, we look at perhaps a course on panel replacement, and in that course we'll take a look at some of the adhesive bonding preparation steps and some of the unique procedures that might be associated with that. And again, that's a critical aspect as we look at repairing those vehicles, that each of those steps along the way in proper surface preparation is carried out, and the panel then adhesively bonded and riveted in place during the open wet time of the adhesive. Aluminum welding is certainly getting some attention out there as well, as folks start to consider the prospect of one of those vehicles showing up in their shop. You know, how are we going to facilitate the repairs on this vehicle? And this is going to be an important piece of understanding what are the repair options. What procedures does the vehicle manufacturer have mapped out, and what tools and techniques am I going to have to be proficient as a technician at executing on that vehicle? So aluminum welding is certainly something that we have to look forward to in our industry, and I want to say a greater volume as we move forward. And I think it's something that, as a technician, I certainly want to be proficient on as soon as possible. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick look at the ICAR website, just so that I want to say, hopefully help you understand, get a little more comfortable with some of the navigation of the website. So I'm going to jump right over to it, and I'm going to explore a few of the different courses that are available on it. So as I jump over to the ICAR website, you'll notice it's organized with different links on the left-hand side: consumer, collision repair, insurance, OEM, and suppliers and career and technical schools. So if you're out in the collision repair industry, you might choose to select this particular link, and that'll take and bring up screens that are more relevant to your particular segment of the industry. As we take a look at the different courses that are available out there, and this is typically where I go in if I want to find a particular course. I may go in just into the course catalog, which is available at this link right down here that says course catalog. And I'm pretty well versed on the different courses that are available from ICAR. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit here, and you'll notice that our course catalog at the top, it says training for your role and course catalog. So if you're a non-structural technician, you may want to find the courses that are relevant to your particular role as a non-structural technician. And you're going to find that with the non-structural technician role, there are some courses that apply to aluminum, even for a non-structural technician, because we have plenty of mixed construction vehicles out there. They may have composites, plastics, steels, and aluminums on exterior panels that a non-structural technician may be addressing repairs on. Then we, of course, have the estimator roles, the steel structural technician roles, refinish technician, and aluminum structural technician roles. Now, if I were an estimator or auto physical damage appraiser, and I were looking at aluminum repairs and things of that nature, from that approach, if I were to take and look at the different pro levels, I could go in here and then identify the different courses that might be applicable to that particular role. Now, I know the courses pretty well, and I know that DAM05 is one of the courses that is applicable to auto physical damage appraiser or estimator. And here's a course that is aluminum panels and structures damage analysis. This particular course for an estimator or auto physical damage appraiser pretty much goes A to Z on aluminum properties and identification, then exterior panel damage analysis, and then we go into structural damage analysis, and then we look at some of the specific requirements that might be in place for an aluminum repair facility. And that's something that we'll discuss briefly towards the end of this presentation. I'm going to go back over to my my non-structural technician role here just very, very briefly, and I'm going to pull up his Pro Level 1 requirements, and I'm going to see if there's anything aluminum related here, and I'm not seeing anything on Pro Level 1, so I'm going to take him to Pro Level 2, and pretty much everything so far is steel structure oriented. But whenever I get to Pro Level 3, what we're going to find here is that we have a course called APR01, which falls under the non-structural technician role at Pro Level 3. APR01 is a course that we recently released. What we did is we took two of the courses that we previously had. We had a course that was called Straightening Aluminum, which had to do with straightening cosmetic aluminum panels. And we had a course which covered panel replacement aluminum for the replacement of exterior welded or rivet bonded or bolted panels on an aluminum vehicle, or an aluminum panel on a vehicle in general. So as we took a look at both of those courses, we found that there were some redundancies between the two, and with encouragement from the industry and feedback from the industry, we brought both of those courses together to form this particular course, which is exterior panel repair and replacement. So this really has to do with cosmetic panels, exterior panels, and straightening them and replacing them. So this is a very versatile course, and what you're going to find with this particular course is that there's actually a tremendous amount of information and detail in here that we pack into about a 3-hour and 15-minute window of time for that particular class. Most of our courses are about 4 hours long, and you'll find that by the time you have the post-test and a break, you've pretty much used up those 4 hours. Nice thing about this particular course is if you wanted to take and explore more and learn more about this particular course on your own, take a look at the video that's right there on the website. We have promotional videos for a number of our courses now that are available and can help you understand the additional information that's in there, as well as additional information on the website as to the content. If you take and you scroll down the page, there's details about the different course contents that are there. So lots of good information there on the website. I'm going to take and move over to my aluminum structural technician. Now let's say like I've got somebody that's taken a look at really focusing on the aluminum structure, not just the cosmetic panels, but we're getting into the underlying structure. So just briefly, I'm going to take a look at his per level requirements here. Now we start him off with some basic things like worker protection, personal safety. Measuring is critical for any vehicle repair, whether it's steel or aluminum or whatever it's made of. Corrosion protection, automotive foams, pretty much standards across the board for any structural repairs on any type of vehicle. We then move into per level 2. On per level 2, we're going to find one of the aluminum courses called Li01. So I'm going to click on that one, and we'll talk just a little bit about aluminum intensive vehicle repairs. In years past, we had 4 different courses. 2 of the courses were called Structural Parts Aluminum. There was Structural Parts Aluminum 1 and Structural Parts Aluminum 2. Then we had a Structural Straightening Aluminum course, and the other one's slipping my mind right now. This is kind of embarrassing. But essentially what we did is we took and we melded those courses together. And we took the best of the content of those and we wrapped it up into this aluminum intensive vehicle repairs course. So we took 12 plus hours of content and we brought it together in a 3-hour course with an estimated duration of about 4 hours with a break and a post-test. And what you'll find with this course is that it really delves into the different types of structural build of aluminum intensive vehicles and some of the repair considerations and straightening considerations and repair techniques that go along with that. We have a number of exercises that are built into this particular course to take and help technicians work through some problem solving, some decision making on common aluminum repairs. Now, we cannot generalize and say, you know, this is applicable to any vehicle. The repairs are always going to be very vehicle specific, what you do on a particular vehicle, and that's always going to be an OEM discussion, if you will. They make those decisions for us. However, it is important, though, where we start to talk about rivet bonding, how to do it properly. We get into a lot of the discussions on those techniques for rivet bonding. And once you learn the techniques for rivet bonding, it's more understanding the nuances of flange preparation by a particular OEM. What are their unique requirements? What are their unique adhesive requirements, tooling requirements, preparation steps? But once you get into the actual rivet bonding piece, it's very similar whenever you start looking at putting a self-piercing rivet in, is putting a self-piercing rivet in versus putting a solid rivet in versus putting in a blind rivet or something of that nature. As long as we know the techniques, we know the tools and equipment, we know how to do it properly, we could potentially be working on an airplane. So that's the Li01 course. That's a very exciting course. Something, though, I want to take and point out about the Li01 course is that what we did when we built the FOR06 course is that we borrowed some of the content from Li01. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go back over to my aluminum technician, and we're going to take and jump up to Pro Level 3, and we're going to see that there's some mechanical courses that are associated with that that go along with Pro Level 3 for structural technicians in general. I'm going to go back over to the course catalog, and in order that I can just pull up the course catalog, I'm going to click on this particular link, and seems F01 that 2015 Ford F150 Structural Repair Training Course, pops right up to the top of that list. It's a very popular course right now. Everybody's very interested in understanding that vehicle, and that's really the idea of this course, is to help the industry get comfortable with what's coming. This is not designed to replace Ford's body service repair information or any of their service information. What this course is really designed to do is help us understand what is the expectation, what are we going to be up against whenever that truck comes into our particular repair facility. So let's take a quick look at the F01 course. What we did when we developed this course is we were essentially under non-disclosure with Ford for about 2 years, working with them directly on putting this course together. We brought the content from Li01, and this is really critical. The first half of this course is designed to help folks that don't have a whole lot of aluminum experience or understanding. Ford wanted us to take and help get the industry up to speed all in one course on the F150. So we took Li01 and we took the essential fundamental content of that that's important on general aluminum repair, and we made the front end of that course. So you'll find that there's a lot of general aluminum repair information in the first half of the F01 course, which is a very critical baseline for any technician or anyone out there in the industry that perhaps doesn't have that information. And we didn't want to have any assumptions in there whenever we went through this particular course. So we've included that information. So the message here is that if you're going to take the F01 course, do not take the Li01 course, because you're going to find that essentially the first half of it is very, very similar on the technical content. Now, the back end of the F01 course, the second half of it, if you will, is very specific to the F150 and the build and the repairs to that vehicle. Now, it's not designed to get down into the details of specific rivet part numbers and things like that. It is designed to help us understand that, yes, the rocker panel reinforcement on the Super Crew Cab is an extrusion, and that particular extrusion cannot and should not be sectioned, whereas the regular cab and the Super Cab have stamped rocker panel reinforcements, and they do have sectioning allowances on those particular rocker reinforcements. So we look at some of the details of the build of the vehicle, such as that. We look at some of the assembly and some of the repair considerations along the way. We discuss things such as cosmetic panel repairs. Does Ford allow the repair of cracks or tears in cosmetic panels? And I'll answer that question, yes, they do. I know that that's going to be one of those questions at the end. So ultimately, those are some of the things that we look at in this particular course so that we have a better understanding of where we need to be whenever that vehicle shows up in our facility. Now, there's a tremendous number of questions still on this vehicle, and I know that we're still awaiting the release of the detailed service information from Ford, but this course will give you a very good idea of what you're going to be faced with whenever you get that vehicle into a repair facility and help you make some of the decisions on how you're going to prepare for that. In the past, we had a number of other, I'm going to say, aluminum courses, and what we've been trying to do in order that we deliver better value for your training dollars is consolidate them down. And that's essentially what we've done with the ICAR course, bringing together a couple of courses, and the Li01 course, bringing 3+ courses together to consolidate down into that. So as we look at the aluminum repair courses from ICAR, and I'm going to come back over to my PowerPoint, I did not include DAM05, which would be a course for the out-of-physical damage appraisers and estimators, but DAM05 is an applicable course for them. And essentially, we've got the 3 courses that are on the screen there at the top of the list. Moving down, though, to welding, I do want to speak just a little bit about aluminum welding. And we've been finding some pretty interesting results out there as we go out and we conduct our welding training and certification. So I'm going to jump back over to the ICAR website here real quick, and I'm going to go back over just to the home page. And we're going to take a look at welding as soon as I can find it. And welding training and certification is right in here. Talking about welding and actually welding is 2 different things. And I enjoy discussing welding with technicians. I really enjoy taking technicians out into the shop and firing up the welder and making the sparks fly. And that's something that our welding instructors really enjoy as well. And that's the real key with our welding training and certification, is that we're going to go out in your shop with your technicians and we're going to pull the trigger on your welding equipment to get those technicians hopefully comfortable and proficient with that equipment, so that whenever vehicles do come in and those technicians need to do the welding on those vehicles, they're better prepared to do that and have the right outcome the first time. So I'm not going to go into the steel programs here, but we will take a brief look at the aluminum welding program. So let me jump over here and there we go. Essentially, whenever we look at this, we look at it's kind of a twofold process. We're going to initially have some discussions with the shop manager or some other representative of the shop on the shop's capacity, capabilities, the equipment on site. Are we ready to actually come out there and do some welding? Typically, our welding instructor will come out and inspect the facility and make sure everything's in place, if that's logistically possible. So that's something that is an important piece of that. And as you take and you look at registering for one of these events, we can go in here and we can then identify on the registration page how a shop can go in and go through the registration process for that. Very important piece of this, and what we try to encourage all shops to do, is come into this particular page and go to this checklist and print this checklist off and work through this checklist and identify that they have all the required items in order that they can be properly prepared for this event. Of note, whenever we take and we look at our welding programs, our aluminum welding training and certification, WCA 03, it might be 5356 alloy wire that's being used. However, if they are preparing for the Ford welding training and certification, they will be required to have the 5554 aluminum welding wire. So Ford does specify a different electrode alloy wire for their particular welding qualification, welding training and certification test. So that's an important element. Essentially, they're still doing the same welds. They're going to be doing the same welds that we would do with the WCA 03 test, but they do specify a different welding electrode wire. So as we take a look at going through that registration process, again, it's all available on the website. We have customer care representatives that can certainly help folks get more comfortable with that. Really, that welding training and certification, it's mostly a day of the technicians welding, actually going in there and physically pulling the trigger and experiencing, and our welding instructors working with the technicians to identify what's a good weld, what's a poor weld, what do we need to do in order to adjust this welder or our technique in order that we can meet the standard of facilitating those particular welds. So definitely great events out there. We get great feedback from the industry as we go out and we conduct these events. So a very important piece of structural repairs on the vehicles. Anytime folks have questions about pricing of any of our events, I always encourage them to take and visit the website and take a look at the pricing structure that's available there. All of that information is available. What I mostly encourage folks to do whenever they're looking at their training and their career path is to make sure that they have a My ICAR account set up. Make sure they know how to get into their My ICAR account. Make sure they've identified their role, and they can then take and follow that particular role path for knowledge area completions, courses completed, and different welding trainings and certifications that may need to be completed in order that they're prepared to do the repairs on the vehicles tomorrow. And this is essentially the login page for that. If your clients have any questions about any of the ICAR website options and things of that nature, certainly encourage them to get in touch with ICAR customer care directly. We have customer care representatives that can usually help them out with any questions they might have or direct that question to somebody that can. Something else I want to point out really quick on the ICAR website. I think it's really important. We get a lot of technical inquiries. And on the ICAR website, we have a technical knowledge portal. And I would certainly encourage folks, whenever they have questions about repairs on vehicles, to take and go on to what we call the Repairability and Technical Support Portal. They've got an 800 number, and they have an email address. And there's a staff of 4 folks here at the ICAR Tech Center in Appleton, Wisconsin, that will do their best to try to give you information on whatever questions you might have. We can't answer every question about everything, but we can generally help you hash out whatever the technical question happens to be. We'd also encourage folks to take and use some of the other resources that are available on the ICAR website. We have a tremendous number of different resources under this Repairability and Technical Support portal that I think you'll find very, very interesting and helpful. And with that, I'm going to jump back over to my PowerPoint real quick and just advance forward very briefly. I generally get a lot of questions about vehicle-specific training. Folks will ask me, what do I need to do to be certified on this particular vehicle? And that can be a multi-hour conversation. The best advice I can give folks is to take and weigh out their business model and the vehicles they're potentially going to be working on. Then identify, what do I really need to do under that particular vehicle maker's requirements? Basically, you need to talk with, or the shop needs to talk with, the vehicle manufacturer representative or the entity that manages their particular program to determine what are the particular requirements of that program to be certified on a particular vehicle, or whatever the terminology that particular vehicle manufacturer may use. Some of these programs are pretty straightforward. Some of them are very, very in-depth and detailed. So again, that's going to be critical that folks really take a look at this on a case-by-case basis, then talk with that vehicle manufacturer or their, again, managing entity to identify, what do I need to do to be quote-unquote certified to work on a particular vehicle. To the best of our knowledge at this point in time, Ford is not going to restrict part sales, and their body repair service information will be available through the Ford Service Information website. I believe that's the motorcraft.com essentially, and again, that's going to be something that probably subscription-based, but they are planning to make the information readily available and repairing the vehicle to anybody that wants it. So that's kind of an interesting approach, and it's going to allow many of us out in the industry to repair the vehicles if we take the time to access the resource, understand the repair processes. There will be some tool investments come along with repairing these vehicles, but I think it's an investment for the long term, not the short term. If you have any questions about the ICAR Professional Development Program, welding, platinum, or gold class, again, please contact our customer care team. And there's our contact information and website. Melissa?
Well, if anybody has any questions, you can type them in the chat box and we'll address those. And I just want to mention again that we are recording this, so I know Jeff went over a lot of information on the website, so you can go back and view it on the recorded webinar and kind of see how we maneuvered through the website. That might be helpful. But no questions? Anybody? I guess you just did a really thorough job, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure working with you, Melissa.
Okay, well, I guess there's no questions, so that concludes the webinar. And again, if you could send me suggestions on future webinars, we'd be, we'd love your suggestions, and we'll certainly bring them to you if we can. And we appreciate everybody being on today's webinar. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.